The Atacama Desert does not feel like it belongs to the Earth. Up here, 5,000 meters above the sea, the air is so thin and so dry that it feels brittle like old paper. It is a place of absolute silence. It is a silence so heavy that you can almost hear the blood rushing in your own ears. For the astronomer sitting alone in the control room, this silence was not empty. It was full of waiting. Outside the thick, insulated walls of the observatory, the wind howled across the red rocks, freezing everything it touched. But inside it was warm. The hum of the computer servers provided a gentle, rhythmic background noise. The astronomer wrapped their hands around a mug of hot coffee, letting the warmth seep into their cold fingers. They looked at the wall of monitors. To anyone else, these screens would look boring. They were just endless cascades of numbers, jagged lines of graphs, and grainy black and white images of the night sky. But to the astronomer, this was not just data. It was a conversation. It was a way of listening to the universe breathing. Tonight was supposed to be routine. The schedule was simple: track a series of known asteroids in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. It was the kind of work that was necessary but dull, the housekeeping of space science. The astronomer rubbed their eyes, fighting off the late-night fatigue, and typed a command into the keyboard to adjust the telescope's sensitivity. That was when the anomaly appeared. It was not a dramatic explosion. It was not a bright flash that blinded the sensors. It was something much smaller, much easier to miss. It was just a single faint pixel of light. On the main screen, a small red notification box blinked. The software had flagged a new object. The astronomer sighed, assuming it was a ghost, a glitch in the camera sensor, or perhaps a speck of cosmic ray interference. They tapped a few keys to reset the image filter, expecting the dot to vanish. It did not vanish. The astronomer leaned in closer, their nose almost touching the glass of the monitor. The dot was still there. It was faint, barely brighter than the background static of the universe, but it was undeniably real. "Okay," the astronomer whispered to the empty room. "What are you?" They began to run the standard calculations. Usually identifying a space rock is like watching a waltz. The planets and the sun are the dancers and gravity is the music. Every asteroid, comet and planet follows a predictable path. They move in ellipses, stretched circles around the sun. It is a beautiful, repetitive dance that has been going on for billions of years. You can look at a rock's movement today and predict exactly where it will be in 100 years. But this object was not waltzing. The astronomer frowned. The initial data coming back from the telescope didn't make sense. They reran the numbers, thinking perhaps they had entered a wrong variable. The result was the same. Most objects in our solar system are like boats floating on a lazy river. They go with the flow of the sun's gravity. This object, however, was moving with a terrifying purpose. First, there was the speed. It was travelling at over 80 kilometers per second. To put that in perspective, a bullet fired from a gun is slow, barely crawling compared to this. It was moving fast enough to cross the distance from the Earth to the Moon in just over an hour. But speed alone wasn't the strangest part. Comets can move fast when they fall toward the sun. The problem was the shape of its path. The astronomer pulled up a simulation on the screen. They drew a line representing the gravity of the sun. Then they plotted the path of this new object. A normal orbit looks like a closed loop. This path was a hyperbola. It looked like a check mark. This meant one impossible thing: the object was not from here. It had not been born in the nursery of our solar system. It was not a cousin to Mars or Jupiter. It was a stranger. It had come from the deep dark void between the stars' interstellar space. It had travelled for millions of years alone in the freezing dark just to pass through our neighbourhood right now. The astronomer felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the observatory's air conditioning. They set the computer to analyse the object's brightness changes. This would tell them how the object was spinning. The graph that appeared was jagged and violent. "You're tumbling," the astronomer murmured. The light from the object dimmed and brightened drastically every 8 hours. This meant the object wasn't a round ball. It was long and thin like a cigar or a needle, tumbling end over end through the darkness. A shape like that was extremely rare in nature. Nature likes spheres and potato shapes. Nature rarely makes perfect needles. Then came the final piece of the puzzle, the detail that made the astronomer's heart stop for a beat. As the object passed the sun, it should have slowed down slightly as it moved away, pulled back by the sun's massive gravity. It was like throwing a ball into the air. Eventually gravity grabs it and slows the ascent. But the data showed something else. The object had accelerated. It wasn't much, just a tiny, subtle push. If it were a comet, this would be normal. Comets are made of ice. When they get close to the sun, the ice boils into gas, shooting out jets that act like little rocket thrusters. This is called outgassing. The astronomer checked the infrared spectrum scanners. They looked for the chemical signature of water, carbon dioxide, or dust, the tail of a comet. The scanners showed nothing. No gas, no dust, no tail. The object was dry rock or metal. So if there was no gas acting as a thruster, what was pushing it? The astronomer sat back in their chair, the cooling coffee forgotten on the desk. The silence of the Atacama Desert seemed to press against the windows harder than before. The math left only a few possibilities. One was that there was some new exotic physics that humans did not yet understand. The other possibility was one that the astronomer hardly dared to think, let alone write down in the official log. If the acceleration wasn't natural, then it had to be artificial. The astronomer looked back at the tiny pixel on the screen. It was already moving away. It was leaving the solar system as quickly as it had arrived. It wasn't stopping to say hello. It wasn't orbiting Earth to invade. It was just passing through. It felt like walking down a lonely road at night and feeling the wind of a fast car rushing past you. You don't see the driver. You don't know where they're going. You just feel the sudden presence of something else, something powerful, something with a destination that has nothing to do with you. For the first time in human history, the door to the solar system had been opened and something had walked in. The astronomer typed a name into the file header 3i Atlas. They stared at the blinking cursor. They were the only person on Earth who knew. For this brief moment, the knowledge belonged only to them. The universe was no longer a lonely, empty room. Someone or something had just walked through the hallway. It was a whisper in the void, and though it was quiet, it changed everything. The room was quiet, but it was not a peaceful silence. It was the heavy electric silence of people who are staring at something they cannot explain. On the giant screens of the observatory, the data lines were not behaving the way they should. In the center of this storm of confusion stood Loeb. He was not looking at the screens with fear, but with the intense focus of a man who had been waiting for this moment for his entire life. Most astronomers spend their careers looking at rocks. They look at dead things, they look at comets that are just balls of ice and dust, or asteroids that are just heavy chunks of metal floating aimlessly in the dark. These objects tumble, they spin out of control, they are slaves to the gravity of the stars they pass. But the object on the screen, the object we had named 3i Atlas, was not behaving like a rock. Dr. Loeb pointed a finger at the trajectory line. It was a curve that defied the basic rules of celestial mechanics. "Look at the excess push," he said softly. "Gravity is pulling it toward the sun, but something else is pushing it away, and it is not gas." This was the first clue that 3i Atlas was not a product of nature, but a product of design. The perfect dance. In nature, movement is usually messy. When a comet gets close to the sun, the heat boils the ice on its surface. This creates jets of steam and gas that shoot out, acting like little rocket thrusters. This makes the comet wobble and change speed. We call this the rocket effect. It is chaotic, it is violent, and most importantly, it is visible. We can see the tail of the comet, we can see the gas, but 3i Atlas had no tail. There was no gas, there was no dust, it was completely dry, yet as it swung around the sun, it accelerated. It gained speed, it moved faster than gravity alone could explain. "It is not tumbling," Dr. Loeb observed, his voice echoing in the control room. "It is gliding." This was the analysis of the impossible motion. If you throw a brick into the air, it spins. If you throw a paper airplane that is perfectly folded, it glides. 3i Atlas was gliding. Its rotation was steady, almost rhythmic. It turned on its axis once every 8 hours, but it did not wobble. It kept its face oriented in a specific way, maximizing its exposure to the starlight. Dr. Loeb used a simple analogy to explain this to the younger researchers. "Imagine a leaf floating on a river," he said. "The leaf moves where the water takes it. Now imagine a motorboat on that same river. The boat can move against the current or move faster than the current. This object, it is steering. It is not fighting the gravity, but it is using it. It is surfing." The precision was terrifying. To enter our solar system at such a high speed, miss all the major planets, swing around the sun at a distance that was close enough to gain energy, but far enough to avoid burning up and then shoot back out toward the constellation of Lyra. This required calculation. A rock does not calculate. A rock does not plan a route. This was the work of an architect, the skin of the starship. As the telescopes gathered more light, the computer simulations began to build a physical model of the object. The image that formed on the monitors was unlike anything in the history of astronomy. It was not a potato shape like most asteroids, it was flat, it was incredibly thin. Dr. Loeb looked at the spectral analysis, the study of the light bouncing off the object to determine what it is made of. "It is not stone," he noted, "and it is not simple iron." The object had a reddish hue similar to the colour of old metal that has been exposed to cosmic radiation for millions of years. But underneath that weathered layer, there was something else. The reflectivity, the amount of light it bounced back, was 10 times higher than a typical asteroid. It shone like a polished mirror. "It is artificial," Loeb stated. He did not say it as a guess. He said it as a fact derived from the data. Look at the heat signature. When an object gets close to the sun, it should get hot. It should radiate that turn heat like a pavement body on a summer day. But 3R the Atlas was cool. It was absorbing the solar energy, but it was not heating up in the way a natural material would. This suggested a material structure that was far more advanced than anything humanity had created. It was a super material. It was likely a thin alloy, perhaps only a few millimeters thick, but stronger than diamond. It had to be. To survive the journey between stars moving at speeds of 100,000 kilometers per hour crashing through dust and hydrogen atoms, it had to be invincible. Then the data showed us something that made the room gasp. During its closest approach to the sun, a small piece of debris, a micrometeorite, likely struck the object. In a normal scenario, this would create a crater or crack the object. The sensors picked up a vibration, a shudder in the structure of 3I Atlas. "Did it break?" someone asked. "No," Dr. Loeb replied, zooming in on the data stream. "It adjusted. The readings showed that the surface of the object rippled. It was like watching skin heal over a cut, but it happened in seconds. The material seemed to flow, redistributing the stress of the impact, smoothing itself out. It was not just a solid shell, it was a smart fabric. It possessed a form of self-repair, perhaps using nanotechnology or a memory metal that returned to its original shape when heated or stressed. It was beautiful. It was not the ugly scarred surface of a dead moon. It was sleek. It was elegant. It was a vessel designed to endure the harshness of eternity. Riding the light. The biggest question remained, how was it moving if it had no engine, no exhaust, and no rocket fuel? What was pushing it? Dr. Loeb turned to the whiteboard. He picked up a marker and drew a simple diagram. He drew the sun, and he drew a flat, thin line representing the object. "Light," he wrote. "Light has no mass," he explained to the room, "but it has energy. It has momentum. When light hits a surface, it pushes it. It is a tiny push, like a feather landing on your hand. But in the vacuum of space, if you have a large enough surface area and a light enough object, that tiny push adds up." This was the theory of the solar sail. On Earth, we use wind to push the sails of a boat. In space, a civilization could use the light of stars to push the sails of a ship. 3I Atlas was a light sail. It was catching the photons, the particles of light streaming from the sun. This explains the acceleration, Loeb said, his eyes bright with excitement. As it moves away from the sun, the gravity tries to pull it back, but the sunlight is hitting the back of the object, pushing it forward. The force of the light is fighting the force of gravity. That is why the math didn't work for a rock. We were calculating for dead weight. We should have been calculating for a kite. This method of propulsion was genius. It required no fuel tanks. It required no heavy engines. It meant the ship could travel forever as long as there were stars to provide light. It was the ultimate form of green energy. It was silent, clean, and efficient. But it implied something else. If this was a sail, it might be defunct. It might be a piece of space junk from 1 billion years ago drifting through the galaxy like a plastic bag in the wind. Or it could be active. Look at the angle, Loeb pointed out. The sail is tilting. It is angling itself to catch the maximum amount of light at the critical moment of departure. A piece of trash does not optimize its angle. A machine does. The object was surfing the curvature of space-time. It was using the gravity of our sun as a slingshot and the light of our sun as the wind. It was a masterclass in physics. It turned the hostile environment of space into a resource. Chaos versus order. Late that night, the observatory was dark, lit only by the glow of the monitors. Dr. Loeb stood by the window looking out at the real night sky. The universe as we usually understand it is a place of violent chaos. Stars explode and die, black holes devour everything nearby. Galaxies crash into each other. Rocks smash into planets. It is a messy, loud, dangerous place. Nature does not draw straight lines. Nature makes rough edges. Look at the asteroid belt, Loeb mused to his assistant. Millions of rocks, all shapes, all sizes, tumbling, colliding, breaking. That is nature. That is chaos. He turned back to the screen where the image of 3I Atlas was frozen. But this, he tapped the screen, this is order. The contrast was stark. In a solar system filled with chaotic debris, 3I Atlas was a symbol of perfect geometry. Its ratio of length to width was extreme 10:1. No asteroid in our system looks like that. It was too perfect. It stood out like a diamond in a pile of mud. Dr. Loeb spoke about the philosophy of the architect. If you are walking on a beach and you see a smooth stone, you assume the ocean made it smooth. But if you find a plastic bottle or a watch or a perfectly square brick, you know the ocean did not do that. You know that an intelligence was involved. You know there was an intention. The universe favours the sphere, Dr. Loeb said. Planets are spheres, stars are spheres, water droplets are spheres, gravity pulls things into balls. But this object fought against the sphere. It maintained a flat, elongated shape. That is an act of rebellion against nature. That is the signature of an architect. The object was a visitor from a place where order had conquered chaos. It represented a civilization that had tamed physics, that had learned to build things that could last longer than the stars themselves. As the team watched the object begin its journey back into the deep dark, a feeling of humility washed over the room. We humans are proud of our rockets. We are proud of our chemical engines that burn fire and make noise. We think we are the masters of space because we went to the moon. But 3i Atlas showed us a different level of mastery. It moved with silence. It moved with grace. It did not fight the universe. It danced with it. It is leaving, a technician said, her voice sad. Yes, Dr. Loeb replied, but it has left us a message. The message was not written in words. It was written in motion. It was written in the impossible curve of its path and the shimmering resilience of its skin. The message was simple: you are not alone, and you are essentially children playing with firecrackers while we sail on the light of stars. The architect of motion had passed through our neighbourhood. It did not stop to say hello, it did not stop to invade, it simply glided by, busy with a purpose we could not comprehend, leaving us staring at the screens, wondering when or if we would ever be smart enough to build a ship that could follow it. The universe holds its breath in the vacuum. To the naked human eye, the space between the stars appears empty, a vast and silent ocean of nothingness. However, to the trained mind, it is a busy highway of radiation dust and gravitational currents. It was here in this deep quiet that the visitor we named Oumuamua began its most critical operation. This was not an invasion of fire and noise, but a silent bloom in the dark. The date was October 31st. On Earth, this date carries a heavy weight of history and folklore. In the West, it is Halloween, a modern celebration rooted in the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. It is the time when the veil between the living and the dead is said to be at its thinnest, a night of ghost spirits and things that go bump in the night. Humans dress in costumes to mock the unknown or to hide from it. It is a night of fear turned into amusement. There is a profound irony in this timing. While humanity was busy looking inward at its own myths, staring into the shadows of its own imagination and pretending to be monsters, a real presence from the stars was taking action above our heads. It was a convergence of celestial mechanics and cultural coincidence. The object did not choose this date because of our calendars. The universe does not care about our holidays. It chose this moment because of geometry. This was the point where the angles between the Sun, the Earth, and its own trajectory were perfectly aligned for what it needed to do next. It was the moment of maximum efficiency. If we embrace the Mothership hypothesis, the idea that the large tumbling object we detected was not just a rock but a carrier vessel, then October 31st marks the moment of deployment. But we must erase the images given to us by Hollywood movies. There were no heavy metal doors grinding open with the sound of hydraulics. There were no fighter jets launching with roaring engines. Advanced civilizations do not use explosions to move through space. That is the primitive way of humans. We burn fuel to push ourselves forward. They presumably harness the environment itself. Imagine a dandelion flower in a summer field. When the wind blows, the flower does not fire the seeds like bullets. It simply lets go. The seeds are released, gently caught by the breeze and carried away to new places. This is the most accurate metaphor for what happened in the dark silence near the orbit of Earth. The mothership, spinning slowly on its axis, released its payload. These were the probes. In scientific terms, we might call them seedids. They were likely small, incredibly lightweight, and numbering in the hundreds, perhaps even thousands. They did not need engines. They were designed to ride the winds of light. The pressure of sunlight is a real force. It is very weak, but in the vacuum of space it is constant. If an object is light enough and has enough surface area, the photons, the particles of light from the sun, will push against it just as a wind pushes against the sail of a boat. This is why we call this technology a solar sail. The probes released by the mothership were likely made of a material thinner than a human hair, yet stronger than steel, capable of reflecting sunlight with near perfect efficiency. As they drifted away from the main body of the mothership, they would have looked like a cloud of shimmering dust catching the light of the distant sun. They unfolded in silence. There was no drama, only physics. They spread out, forming a wide net. constellation of artificial eyes designed to sweep past our planet. This was the deployment. It was a maneuver of grace and elegance, utilizing the natural energy of our star to brake, steer, and direct these tiny explorers toward their target ass. The choice of a solar sail design speaks volumes about the intelligence behind it. It is a passive system. It requires no fuel tanks, no reactors, and no moving parts that can break down over thousands of years. It is the ultimate reliable technology. It suggests a civilization that thinks in the long term, a species that has learned to work with nature rather than fighting against it. They did not force their way to Earth. They sailed here on the light of our own sun. But if thousands of probes were released, why did we not see them? Why did our radars remain silent? Why did the sky not fill with warnings? This brings us to the second crucial aspect of the event, the technology of stealth. When we think of stealth, we think of military aircraft painted black shaped to deflect radar waves. We think of hiding in the shadows. But in space, there are no shadows to hide in. Everything is exposed to the light of the stars. To hide in space, you must become invisible not by disappearing, but by blending in. The probes were likely extremely small, perhaps no larger than a smartphone, or even smaller. In the vastness of space, an object that size is almost impossible to detect unless you know exactly where to look. Furthermore, a sufficiently advanced civilization would possess materials we can only dream of. We call these metamaterials. These are materials engineered at the microscopic level to interact with light and radio waves in specific ways. Imagine a material that does not reflect radar waves back to the source, but absorbs them completely like a sponge absorbing water. Or even more advanced, a material that bends light around it, like water flowing around a stone in a river. To our telescopes and our sensors, these probes would appear as nothing more than empty space. They would be ghosts. This capability implies a mastery of optics and electromagnetism that is centuries ahead of our own. It suggests that they knew we were here. You do not build stealth technology for a universe without observers. If they designed their probes to be hard to see, it implies they knew there was someone who might be looking. It suggests they understood the concept of eyes or sensors. This realization is chilling but also fascinating. It confirms that we are not just interacting with a rock, but with a mind. The silence of the deployment was absolute. While children on Earth were trick-or-treating, shouting "trick or treat," and lighting pumpkins, and a fleet of alien devices was silently adjusting its course. They were correcting their trajectory using the subtle push of the solar wind to ensure they would pass close enough to Earth to gather data, but not so close as to burn up in our atmosphere. This brings us to the sensation of being observed. For all of human history, we have been the ones doing the looking. We look at the ants in the dirt. We look at the birds in the trees. We look at the bacteria under the microscope. We are the explorers, the scientists, the masters of our domain. We are the ones who tag sharks to track their movements. We are the ones who put cameras in the jungle to watch tigers. We have always been the observer, never the observed. The arrival of the Mothership and the deployment of the probes flips this dynamic completely. Suddenly we are the ants. We are the bacteria in the petri dish. We are the tigers in the jungle, unaware that a camera lens is focused on us from the canopy above. There is a fear that comes with this. It is a primal fear, the feeling of being watched by a predator in the tall grass. This is why our movies are full of alien invasions, explosions, and wars. We project our own violent history onto the stars. We assume that if someone comes here, they want to take what we have. We assume they are like the European explorers of the past coming to conquer and colonize. However, the nature of the October 31st event suggests something different. It suggests a benign curiosity. The behavior of the object and its probes was not aggressive. They did not try to communicate, but they also did not try to attack. They simply passed by. They watched. Think about how a scientist observes a coral reef. The scientist does not want to destroy the reef. They do not want to eat the fish. They want to understand it. They want to know how the ecosystem works, how the energy flows, and what life forms exist there. They observe with a sense of wonder and respect. If the scientist is careful, the fish never even know they are being watched. This is likely the feeling of the intelligence behind the Mothership. They are an ancient civilization. They have probably seen thousands of worlds. Earth is interesting, yes, but we are likely not unique. We are a Type 0 civilization still struggling to leave our own planet, still fighting wars over resources, still burning dead plants for energy. To a civilization capable of interstellar travel, we are like children in a nursery. The probes released on that Halloween night were likely gathering a specific type of data. They were not counting our tanks or measuring our gold reserves. They were likely analyzing our atmosphere. They were tasting the air for oxygen, methane, and water vapor, the chemical signatures of life. They were listening to our radio waves, the chaotic noise of our television broadcast, our phone calls, our internet traffic. They were building a picture of who we are. There is a beauty in this passive observation. It implies that the universe is not a dark forest full of hunters, but perhaps a library where different stories are read and preserved. The probes acted as librarians cataloguing the story of Earth. The stealth was not necessarily military camouflage. It may simply have been efficiency. Why waste energy glowing like a Christmas tree when you can travel invisibly and save power? Why announce your presence to a primitive species that might panic if you walk through a forest? You step quietly, so you do not scare the birds. You do not hide because you're evil, you hide because you do not want to disturb the natural order. The probes moved fast. Their speed relative to the sun was tens of thousands of kilometers per hour. They swept past the orbit of Earth, collecting their terabytes of data, and then continued outward. They did not stop. This is another crucial point: the lack of interference. They did not land on the White House lawn. They did not hijack our screens. They looked, they recorded, and they moved on. This transient nature makes the event even more mysterious. It feels like a brush with the divine or a ghost passing through a room. We felt the breeze, but we saw no face. The date October 31st serves as a permanent marker in our history, even if we did not realize it at the time. It represents the moment the human race graduated from being the lonely masters of the universe to being one of many potential curiosities in a crowded galaxy. As the probes drifted away, carried by the relentless pressure of the sun's light moving further into the dark, cold reaches of the outer solar system, they took with them a snapshot of humanity. They hold a recording of us, our music, our wars, our weather, our biological makeup. Somewhere in the dark inside a tiny, silent machine is a record of who we were in the early 21st century, the Mothership. The parent vessel continued its tumbling journey, acting as the relay station. It likely collected the weak signals from the scattered dandelion seeds, bundled the data, and beamed it toward a distant point in the galaxy, toward a home we cannot see. We are left with the feeling of having been scanned. It is a feeling of vulnerability, but also of validation. We are interesting enough to be watched. We matter. The silent observer came, it saw, and it left us to continue our struggle on this pale blue dot. It left us with the knowledge that the silence of space is not empty. It is simply waiting. The technology displayed the solar sails, the stealth materials, the autonomous deployment serves as a benchmark for our own future. It shows us what is possible. It shows us that one day, perhaps in 1,000 years, we might be the ones building a mothership. We might be the ones sending dandelion seeds to a distant star to watch a young civilization take its first steps, observing them with the same benign, silent curiosity that was gifted to us on that quiet Halloween night. The event forces us to look at the night sky differently. It is no longer just a wallpaper of pretty lights. It is an ocean, and we have just seen the fin of a great whale breaking the surface. We did not see the whole creature, and we do not know where it is going, but we know it is there, and we know that it knows we are here. The probes are likely still out there, perhaps drifting dormant in the space between stars, or perhaps they have self-destructed to protect their technology. But the data they collected is travelling at the speed of light towards a destination we can only guess at. We have been archived, we have been noted, and so the observer remains silent. It does not judge, it does not intervene. It simply watches a sophisticated eye in the dark, witnessing the slow, painful, beautiful evolution of life on Earth. The Mothership was not a conqueror, it was a witness. And on October the 31st, while we wore masks to hide our identities, it stripped us bare and saw us exactly as we are. The heavy mechanical hum of gears turning began in the Pacific. It was a sound that was usually isolated, heard only by the few technicians shivering in the thin air of high-altitude summits. But tonight, in a metaphorical sense, the whole world heard it. On the dark peak of Mauna Kea in Hawaii, the giant white domes rotated against the backdrop of a star-filled sky. They moved with the slow, deliberate grace of waking giants. Inside mirrors the size of swimming pools angled themselves, catching the faint light from the depths of space. Thousands of miles away, as the sun dipped below the horizon, in the Canary Islands, the telescopes on La Palma woke up to join their Hawaiian siblings. Then the great radio dishes in the Atacama Desert of Chile, sitting on a plateau so dry it resembles Mars more than Earth, swiveled in perfect unison. It was no longer just a collection of isolated observatories. For the first time in human history, the Earth was acting like a single living organism. These telescopes were no longer separate tools owned by different nations. They had become the eyes of the planet. The fiber optic cables buried deep under the oceans pulsed with data connecting these eyes to a central brain. The planet had formed a neural network, a nervous system made of glass, metal and silicon, all focused on a single point in the dark void. The synchronization was flawless. In the past, getting time on these machines required months of paperwork, bureaucratic fighting and national jealousy. A scientist in France would have to beg for data from a telescope in America. A researcher in China would work in isolation from a colleague in Germany. But the signal had burned those barriers away in a single instant. There were no more forms to sign. There were no more approvals needed. The directors of the world's greatest observatories simply opened the doors. The command was simple: look. As the Earth rotated, passing the baton of observation from one continent to the next, a continuous stream of data flowed. When the sun rose over the radio telescopes in Australia, they handed the task over to the arrays in South Africa. When the clouds rolled in over the Andes Mountains, the clear skies of Arizona took over the burden. The planet never blinked. It was a planetary pulse, a rhythm of observation that matched the rotation of the globe itself. But this neural network did not end with the billion-dollar machines on the mountain peaks. It extended down into the valleys, into the suburbs, into the noisy cities and the quiet farmlands. This was the second layer of the Earth's reaction, and perhaps the most beautiful one: the amateur astronomers. These were the people who had spent their lives looking up, often alone, often misunderstood. They were the ones who stood on freezing rooftops in London, or in mosquito-filled backyards in Florida, or on the dusty plains of the Australian outback. They used telescopes they had bought with saved wages, or mirrors they'd ground by hand in their garages. Usually they looked for the rings of Saturn or the craters of the moon. But tonight they were the infantry in this grand army of observation. Social media and online forums became the command centers. A request would go out: cloud cover over the official observatory in Chile. Can anyone in the southern hemisphere cover the target coordinates? Within seconds, hundreds of replies would flood in: ready in New Zealand. Scope is open in Argentina. Tracking now from a farm in Namibia. It was a democratization of science that had never been seen before. The professional scientists sitting in their control room surrounded by screens found themselves relying on a teenager in Brazil or a retired teacher in Japan to fill in the gaps. The amateurs provided the texture, the continuous coverage that the big machines sometimes missed. They were the connective tissue between the high science of the professionals and the ordinary reality of the human race. One particularly moving image that circulated online showed a rooftop in a crowded city in India. It was jammed with people. In the center stood a young boy no older than 12 adjusting a small battered telescope. Around him, adults, neighbors, shopkeepers, taxi drivers waited patiently in line. They weren't looking at the signal itself, which was invisible to the eye, but they were looking at the patch of sky where it came from. The boy was explaining, pointing, his face glowing not just from the streetlights, but from the pride of connection. He was the bridge. He was translating the language of the universe for his community. This scene repeated itself in thousands of variations across the globe. The sky, which had for so long been ignored by a humanity obsessed with its screens and its ground-level problems, was suddenly the only thing that mattered. The planetary pulse was not just digital, it was emotional. As the days passed, a strange phenomenon occurred regarding the concept of borders. On the maps in the classrooms and the war rooms, the black lines dividing nations still existed. But in the minds of the people and in the actions of the leaders, they were fading. The signal did not care about the imaginary lines humans had drawn on the dirt. It shone on the communist and the capitalist alike. It reached the rich nation and the poor nation at the same speed, the speed of light. In the control centers, the change was palpable. Russian flight dynamics experts were video calling with American propulsion engineers without a single security minder in the room. Chinese data analysts were streaming raw code to European servers without filtering it. The US versus them mentality, which had defined human history for thousands of years, collapsed under the sheer weight of the US versus the vastness. The realization was collective. We are small. When you are standing on a tiny rock floating in an infinite sea of black, fighting over which corner of the rock is yours suddenly seems absurd. The perspective of the species had shifted. It was the overview effect the feeling astronauts get when they see Earth from space, but now everyone on the ground was feeling it at the same time. The United Nations held an emergency session, but the tone was different. Usually these meetings were filled with shouting accusations and political theatre. This time the room was quiet. The delegates wore headphones listening to the latest summary from the Scientific Council. When the representative from a small island nation spoke, saying, "We are just one village listening to the dark," Heads nodded in agreement. The superpowers did not posture. They did not threaten. They simply offered resources. "We have computing power," said one. "We have energy," said another. "We have the optimal location," said a third. It was a puzzle, and everyone held a piece. And what of the atmosphere among the common people? One might expect panic. Hollywood movies and science fiction novels had trained humanity to expect invasion, destruction, and war whenever aliens were mentioned. They taught that the arrival of a signal meant the arrival of a fleet, but the reality was strikingly different. There was no panic in the streets. There was no looting. The grocery stores were not emptied in a frenzy of survivalism. Instead, a great hush fell over the world. It was a mood of deep, heavy contemplation. It was as if the human race had collectively stopped running, stopped shouting, and sat down on the curb to think. The noise of daily life, the celebrity scandals, the stock market fluctuations, the political arguments dropped to a whisper. They seemed trivial now. People gathered in parks at night not to riot but to sit. They brought blankets and thermoses of tea. They lay on the grass and looked up. Parents pointed out the constellations to their children, whispering the stories of the stars but adding a new chapter: someone might be there. The fear that had been predicted was replaced by a profound curiosity, and beneath that a fragile, glowing hope. For so long humanity had felt alone. We had felt like an accident of biology drifting in a cold, dead universe. The loneliness of the species was a heavy burden even if we rarely spoke of it. To know, or even to suspect that there was another mind out there, another civilization that had survived long enough to send a message, was a comfort. It meant that survival was possible. It meant that technology and intelligence did not inevitably lead to self-destruction. If they were out there pulsing a rhythm across the galaxy, then perhaps we could make it too. In the coffee shops, the conversations changed. Strangers spoke to strangers. "Do you think they are like us?" a woman might ask the man standing behind her in line. "I hope they are better than us," he might reply with a tired smile. "Maybe they have solved the problems we can't fix." Religious leaders too found their churches, mosques and temples full, but the prayers were not for salvation from a demon. They were prayers of gratitude and wonder. The scale of creation had just expanded, and for the faithful it only magnified the glory of the Creator. The theological debates that many feared would tear religions apart did not happen. Instead, the mystery brought a sense of humility. If the universe is a house, we just realized we are not the only family living in it. The planetary pulse continued. Day turned to night and night turned to day. The telescopes kept turning, handing off the data like a precious jewel. The servers hummed, processing petabytes of information, looking for patterns, for language, for mathematics. The signal was a heartbeat, and in response, the heartbeat of humanity slowed down and synchronized. The imagery of the global brain became literal in the data centers. Screens displayed the real-time status of the observation network. A map of the world glowed with dots representing active listeners. It looked exactly like a scan of a human brain firing with electrical activity. When the signal peaked, the map lit up. When the Earth turned the receiving side away, the data was transferred to the other side of the brain. In the end, the most significant reaction of humanity was not the technology nor the politics. It was the waiting. It was a wait devoid of boredom. It was an active electric waiting. Imagine a concert hall where the lights have just gone down. The audience falls silent. The conductor has raised the baton, but the music has not yet started. In that split second of silence, everyone is united. Everyone is holding their breath. The rich and the poor, the old and the young are all focused on the exact same expectation. That was the state of the Earth. The lights had dimmed. The chatter had stopped. The planet was leaning forward in its seat. From the frozen ridges of Antarctica, where scientists stood in parkas, watching the southern aurora, to the humid streets of Singapore, where commuters paused to watch the news on giant outdoor screens, the feeling was the same. We were ready. We were listening. The fear of the unknown is a natural human instinct. But it turns out the desire for connection is stronger. The desire to know we are part of a larger story is the strongest force of all. The telescopes hummed, the hard drives spun, the amateur astronomers adjusted their focus knobs with cold fingers, and humanity for the first time in its existence stood together on the deck of spaceship Earth, looking out at the dark ocean not with dread but with a quiet unified invitation. We are here, we are listening, tell us your story. This was the planetary pulse, it was the sound of a species growing up. It was the realization that the other is not the enemy but the mirror. And as the data piled up and the analysis began, the world held its breath, ready for the first note of the symphony to begin. The Great Preparation. The moment humanity confirms we are not alone, The silence of the universe will end, but the noise on Earth will just be beginning. This moment requires more than just a technological response. It demands a profound psychological and diplomatic evolution. We call these the protocols of peace. These are not merely documents signed by generals or politicians. They are a new operating system for the human spirit. For thousands of years, we have looked at the stars and wondered. But looking is passive. Preparing to be looked back at is active. The preparation for this first contact begins long before a spaceship lands or a signal is decoded. It begins in the minds of the people and the halls of our institutions, the psychological shift from panic to purpose. The first challenge is the human mind. Our brains evolved to detect immediate threats in the bushes, not to comprehend intelligence from light years away. The announcement of extraterrestrial life would trigger what psychologists call an ontological shock. This means a shaking of our fundamental understanding of reality. To prepare for this, we must move away from the Hollywood narrative of invasion. For decades, movies have taught us that aliens come to destroy, eat, or enslave us. This fear is a projection of our own history. Because humans conquered each other, we assume others will conquer us. The first step of the protocols of peace is a global educational shift. We must teach ourselves that a civilization capable of travelling across the vast darkness of space has likely surpassed the need for petty war. They would have access to unlimited energy and resources from stars and asteroids. They would not need our water or our gold. Therefore, the preparation is about managing fear. It is about shifting our collective mindset from defense to curiosity. We must prepare to stand before them not as trembling victims, but as dignified students ready to learn, or perhaps as younger siblings ready to say hello. The institutional response speaking with one voice who speaks for Earth. This is the most difficult diplomatic question in history. If a signal arrives tomorrow, we cannot have the United States, China and Russia sending 3 different conflicting messages. That would make us look like a chaotic divided house. The United Nations would likely activate the Post-Detection Task Force. This group would not just include soldiers and scientists. It would include linguists to decode languages, anthropologists to understand alien cultures, and ethicists to guide our decisions. The protocol dictates that no single nation can monopolize the contact. The data must be shared with the entire world simultaneously. This is crucial to prevent paranoia. If one country hides the information, the rest of the world will assume the worst. Transparency is the foundation of peace. Furthermore, we would see the rise of diplomacy with the outside. We would need to agree on a greeting. What do we say? We should not list our weapons or our borders. We should list our achievements in art, music, and mathematics. We should send the value of pi, the music of Bach, and the structure of our DNA. We should show that we are creators, not destroyers. The role of spiritual leaders. Science can explain how the aliens got here, but it cannot explain what it means to the human soul. This is where religion and philosophy must evolve. For centuries, many believed that humans were the center of the universe, unique and special in the eyes of the divine. Finding others might feel like losing that special status. However, the protocols of peace suggest a different view. Spiritual leaders from the Pope to the Dalai Lama to the Grand Imams would play a critical role in stabilizing society. They would need to guide their followers to a larger understanding that the creation is much grander than we thought. Instead of seeing aliens as others or demons, the narrative must shift to seeing them as fellow travelers in a vast cosmos. The discovery of other life does not diminish God or spirituality. It magnifies the canvas upon which life is painted. It forces us to expand our circle of compassion to include not just all human, but all sentient beings. The birth of cosmic citizenship. Perhaps the most profound change will be the death of tribalism. Currently, we define ourselves by where we were born. I am French. I am Vietnamese. I am Brazilian. We fight over lines drawn on maps. We fight over resources that are trapped in the crust of one small planet. But when we look up and see a ship that has travelled from the Orion Nebula, the border between 2 countries on Earth will seem incredibly small and silly. This is the concept of cosmic citizenship. It is the realization that before we are anything else, we are Earthlings. We are the people of the blue planet. Imagine an astronaut looking down at Earth. They do not see borders. They see a fragile blue marble in a sea of black vacuum. First contact brings this overview effect to everyone on the ground. Political unity. We might finally see the formation of a true planetary council, not to rule with an iron fist, but to coordinate our interaction with the galaxy. we would realize that pollution in one country affects the atmosphere of the whole planet, which is our only spaceship. Resource management. We would understand that fighting over oil is pointless when the universe is full of energy. We would stop behaving like children fighting over toys in a sandbox and start behaving like a crew maintaining a vessel. This shift to cosmic citizenship is the ultimate protocol of peace. It brings peace not just with the aliens, but with ourselves. We cannot join a galactic community if we are still killing each other. To be invited to the table of the stars, we must first clean our own house. The leap technology, medicine and awareness. If the contact is peaceful, the exchange of knowledge would transform human existence overnight. This is not just about getting new gadgets, it is about a fundamental restructuring of how we live, the energy revolution. Currently, we burn dead plants, fossil fuels to keep warm and move around. It is primitive and dirty. A starfaring civilization would likely use zero-point energy or advanced fusion harnessing the power of the sun in a bottle. If they shared this knowledge, poverty could end. With unlimited clean energy, we could desalinate all the ocean water we need for farming. We could recycle all waste back into raw materials. The economy of scarcity, where things are valuable because they are rare, would be replaced by an economy of abundance. The medical renaissance. Our medicine is reactive. We wait until something breaks, then we try to fix it. An advanced civilization would likely understand biology at the molecular level. Imagine nanotechnology, tiny machines the size of blood cells that could enter the human body and repair damage from the inside. They could hunt down cancer cells one by one. They could repair the damage of aging. However, this brings ethical questions. If humans can live for 500 years, how does society change? Do we stop having children? These are the questions the protocols must address. We must prepare for the shock of longevity, the expansion of consciousness. The greatest technology might not be a machine, but a way of thinking. We currently use a very small part of our cognitive potential. Through their influence, we might learn to unlock greater empathy, telepathy, or simply a higher state of rationality. We might learn that time is not a straight line, or that consciousness is a field that connects us all. This would be the final step in our preparation, the understanding that we are not isolated individuals, but parts of a connected whole. Maturation from child to adult. Ultimately, the protocols of peace are a coming-of-age story. For 200,000 years, humanity has been like an infant in a cradle. We have cried, we have slept, and we have played with the dangerous matches of nuclear weapons. We have been alone in the nursery. First contact is the moment the door opens and we realize that there is a whole house outside the nursery and a whole city outside the house. To enter this wider world, we must grow up. We must leave behind the tantrums of war. We must leave behind the greed that destroys our environment. We cannot bring our toxic habits into the galaxy. The Great Filter is a scientific theory that suggests many civilizations destroy themselves before they can travel the stars. They invent nuclear bombs before they invent world peace. They invent artificial intelligence before they invent wisdom. The protocols of peace are our promise to ourselves that we will pass the filter. We will survive our own adolescence. When we finally shake hands or tentacles or light beams with visitors from the stars, we want to do so as equals. We want to show them that although we are young, we are worthy. We are curious, we are kind, and we are ready to learn. We are ready to stop being just the keepers of the house and start being members of the galactic community. This is the future we prepare for. This is the hope that guides us. And now, as we reach the end of our journey together, I invite you to let go of the data, the numbers, and the theories. Let the scientific facts fade into the background when leaving only the feeling they have created. We have travelled millions of miles in our minds, but now it is time to return to the most important place of all, the here and now. Take a moment to notice where you are. Feel the surface beneath you. Whether you are lying in your bed, resting in a chair, or simply pausing in a quiet corner of your home, feel how the earth supports you. There is a gentle gravity holding you, a force that has been there since the moment you were born, anchoring you safely to this planet. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Listen to the rhythm of your own breathing. Inhale slowly and imagine that with every breath in, you are drawing in the calmness of the night sky. Exhale gently and imagine that you are releasing all the tension of the day, all the noise and all the questions. Let them drift away like dust in the solar wind. Think about the journey we have just discussed. We spoke of Comet 3I Atlas. We spoke of its orbit, its brightness, and its destiny. But in the quiet of this moment, ask yourself, what does this visitor really mean to you? Regardless of whether this comet survives its brush with the sun or whether it breaks apart into a cloud of sparkling ice and dust, its true purpose has already been fulfilled. It made us look up. In a world that often forces us to look down at our screens to worry about the immediate future or to rush through our days, this celestial traveller paused us. It acted as a mirror. When we look into the darkness of space to find a comet, we are actually looking for a connection. We are reminded that our problems, as big as they feel right now, are very small compared to the vastness of the solar system. There is a strange comfort in that. It means you do not have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. The universe is big enough to carry it for you. Now let us drift deeper into relaxation. I want you to use your imagination. Visualize that the ceiling above you and the roof over your head simply dissolves. It fades away like mist, revealing the night sky directly above you. The air is cool and fresh, the night is silent. Above you stretches a canvas of velvet black, darker and deeper than anything you have ever seen. Scattered across this darkness are thousands of stars. Some are bright and piercing like diamonds. Others are soft and faint like distant candles. They are steady. They are calm. They have been watching over the earth for billions of years. Imagine you are floating gently upwards, leaving your physical body resting safely and warmly in your bed. You are light as a feather. Your eyes slowly passing through the cool night air higher and higher. The lights of your city or your town begin to fade below you. The noises of the streets disappear. You are now floating in the high atmosphere. Above you, the stars are no longer twinkling. They are steady points of pure light. You can see the band of the Milky Way, a river of white light stretching across the cosmos. This is your home. This galaxy is your neighborhood. Somewhere in this vast darkness, the Comet Atlas is moving. Imagine you can see it. It is not a ball of rock, it's a masterpiece of nature. Visualize a glowing core of ice and ancient dust. It leaves a trail behind it, a tail of light that stretches for millions of miles. It moves silently. There is no sound in space, no wind, just the perfect peaceful silence of the void. In this silence there is no rush. The comet does not hurry. The planets do not rush their orbits. Everything moves in a perfect cosmic dance that has continued for eons. You are part of this dance. You are not a stranger to this sky. Science tells us a beautiful truth. The atoms in your body, the carbon in your cells, the iron in your blood, the oxygen you breathe were not created on Earth. They were forged inside the hearts of giant stars that lived and died long before the sun was born. When those stars exploded, they scattered their dust across the universe. That dust gathered together to form the Earth and eventually to form you. So when you look at the comet or when you visualize the stars, you are looking at your ancestors. You are looking at where you came from. Your stardust that has come alive for a brief moment to look back at the universe and wonder. This is the eternal connection. You belong to the sky just as much as you belong to the Earth. Feel this connection wrapping around you like a warm blanket. You're safe here. In the vastness of space, you're not lost, you're held. The same laws of physics that keep the planets in orbit are the same laws that keep your heart beating. You're in sync with the rhythm of the universe. Now slowly bring your awareness back down. Drift down from the stars, back through the atmosphere, back through the roof, and settle gently back into your body. Feel the weight of your blankets, feel the softness of your pillow, but bring the silence of space with you. Keep that feeling of vastness inside your chest. Your breathing is now very slow and very deep. Your heart is beating with a slow, steady rhythm, calm and relaxed. Your legs feel heavy and warm, your arms feel heavy and warm, your eyelids feel incredibly heavy, so heavy that you could not open them even if you wanted to. And you do not want to. You only want to rest. The Comet Atlas will continue its journey flying through the dark whether we watch it or not. It does not need our attention to be beautiful. And just like the comet, you do not need to do anything right now to be worthy of rest. You do not need to solve any more problems today. You do not need to think any more thoughts. Your journey for today is done. You have traveled far, you have learned much. Now the only thing left to do is to let go. Imagine the light of the comet slowly fading into the distance, becoming smaller and smaller until it is just a tiny speck of light and then nothing, just the peaceful, comforting dark. Allow yourself to sink deeper into the mattress. Let every muscle in your face relax. Smooth out your forehead, unclench your jaw, let your shoulders drop. The stars are shining above you, watching over your sleep. The universe is holding you. You are connected to everything forever. Drift into the quiet, drift into the peace. Good night, traveler. Good night. Sleep.